Good morning and welcome to Shattering Myths, a program devoted to those of you who know that there's something wrong with the political and religious institutions which govern our nation, and who realize that the considerable malfeasance is also inherent in the media and the military and with global economic influences. We've come to know that these institutions are the problem. They have caused the problem, which means they cannot be the solution. Therefore, our mission is to look behind the headlines so that we know who is perpetrating these schemes, because the plague of adverse political, religious, military, and economic influences that are now ravaging the world tell us that at the outside we have no more than 15 years until all hell is unleashed, whether it be economic, whether it be militaristic, whether it be propagandist. The world as we know it will no longer exist. As a result of these things, in our second hour, we're going to engage God on His terms through evidence and reason, since His guidance regarding His covenant provides a safe escape. Our phone number, if you'd like to participate in this discussion anytime over the next 2 hours, is 877-300-7645. I was thinking this morning, that we had terrible storms that ravaged much of the northern plains yesterday. Very odd to have tornadoes this early. Well, I guess it would be late in this case, and mid to late November. They're typically a function of warm, moist, and unstable air. But nonetheless, they occurred. They were devastating and deadly. Follows, the very late typhoon, very early typhoon, I guess, because that's the other side of the world, the bottom of the world in the Philippines. We are definitely hitting a period of time where weather-borne and earthquake natural disasters are raising havoc with people's lives. And I thought, we really have a confluence of events here that are going to continue to shape our world over the next 13 to 20 years. And we ought to just take a moment and put all of it into perspective and see how all of this is building towards a climax. At the forefront of all this, we have terrorism. 99% of terrorism is perpetrated by fundamentalist Muslims. It is a direct descendant, if you will, of Islam. And even in this regard, what we're seeing is that rather than the world just literally explode right now into world war, there is a dampening, I should say, mechanism. And that is the prophecy that was revealed by Yahowah regarding Ishmael, whom Muslims claim is the forefather of their religion. And of Ishmael's descendants, after calling them wild asses of men, Yahowah said that their hand will be raised against their brother, and their brother's hand will be raised against them as they live in hostility with the whole world. And what we're seeing in so many places around the world, in Yemen and Syria, in Egypt, in Iraq, is Sunni versus Shia terrorism. And so rather than unleashing their living hell on the non-Muslims, they are in the midst of killing one another, which is really a throttling mechanism for what they will ultimately do, which is in unison to decide that their primary enemy is Israel, when here now, just in 14 years, the Magog, which is an all-Islamic war against Israel, will be begun. We also see that the world is poised for war. We have Russia and China on one side with supporting Iran and Syria, for example, the flashpoints of the world. And we see Europe and the United States on the other. We even find that Europe is becoming more anti-Semitic, more willing to abandon Israel. The French President Holliday is in the West Bank today telling the Jews that they need to stop that dastardly behavior of building homes. But the world is poised for war. We've talked about the fact that in the 400 years that the Americas, the Europeans have been in the Americas, that there have been 101 wars that trend of one war every 4 years has been manifest since the colonists first arrived. We also see that the alliances that are being formed are on the cusp of going nuclear, something that is going to happen in 2028. The world will engage in nuclear war. We see Russia today guiding Iran to a ill-advised treaty with the West, of which America is lapping up the poison, ready to sign. We'll consider the reports on this momentarily, but with Iran having the war, you need a catalyst. Somebody needs to go nuclear first. Somebody needs, for a nuclear confrontation to occur, which is one of the predictions that the elements themselves meet with intense heat. You've got to have a rogue nation that is willing to do something that is heinous, and that nation is in all likelihood Iran. And this treaty that's about to be signed with Iran that will allow Iran to be completely free to finish its nuclear ambitions without any interference is just within weeks of being signed. Of course, we have the climate for pandemics. Yahowah, specifically in his Olivet discourse, told us there'd be a rise of terrorism, a world war. And he spoke of pandemics and famines. And with the climate change, and we are experiencing climate change, the Earth is definitely warming. Now, it hasn't been in the last 16 years, but it has been since 1875 as we emerged from the Little Ice Age. And while a warming trend is typically beneficial in a world now that is so overpopulated, pandemics and starvation are going to result from what we're witnessing in terms of the onslaught of ever greater and more frequent storms. And in this regard, too, one of the things that we see is something that prophecy tells us is going to have, which is world economic control, and the errant conclusion that global warming is not a natural trend, but instead a man-made calamity, is going to cause the imposition of a one-world government that fleeces productive nations, and in a socialistic mindset provides aid that makes those nations that are not productive dependent. We're going to see a rise in military and police states is another thing that we're witnessing around the world. The United States in particular has become the most militaristic nation on earth. We are the ultimate police state. And you see even those that would claim to be right-wingers and revel in freedom calling for ever larger military expenditures and ever more police. And yet the people are increasingly around the world losing their freedoms to militaries and police, and getting to the point now where it is almost impossible to protect oneself from them. Spying, of course, is becoming ubiquitous. The mechanisms of controlling people economically, militarily, through the police, garnering total compliance. This centralized spying, ubiquitous spying, easy manipulation of the spying implements to actually kill, has made it possible for the Orwellian kind of state, this elitist slave kind of state that the world is heading towards. And of course, in the midst of all this, you get growing government dependency, not only in Europe and the United States, but even in the Islamic world, where the only way that they're keeping the fiefdoms together and those dictatorships together is by bribing people with the money that comes out of the black ooze beneath their sands. We're creating worldwide total government dependency, and doing so in a manner that is bankrupting nations. And then lastly, you see through America's Obamacare, a socialized medicine plan from each according to their ability, to each according to their need, delivered in a fascist mechanism with free enterprise companies providing the insurance through a central government clearinghouse. And it was a particularly revealing week this past week for one of the most lethal players in the planet's demise. This would be Islam. And so I began to think of, since all of these signs are materializing before our eyes, what are the major contributors to the destruction of humanity as we have come to know life on this planet, particularly in countries like those in the West. And you see that there are 7 things that are all going awry, rising in terms of their popularity and influence and malfeasance. And these would include, first and foremost, religion. The religions of Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and environmentalist, socialist, secularism, humanism are all myths which are deceiving, destroying, killing, all too often through terror. Islam is on a horrible rise, perpetrating 99% of the terrorist events around the world. Every time there is a tragedy in the world, Christians dive deeply into their mythos, and rather than respond appropriately, blame all manner of things on God. Judaism, of course, is central to all of this because rather than Israel relying on Yahowah's covenant promises, they have disassociated themselves with him and therefore are enduring many of the events, the anti-Semitism that is on our immediate horizon. And I don't think there's anything today as influential or as reckless, as destructive as the socialist, secular, humanist agenda, particularly that embracing environmentalist control over the world. Of course, politics and nationalism is on a rise. America is still lost in this myth of manifest destiny and a force for good as we try to control every country on earth. You have the rise of Russia and China, Russia being resolutely fascist, China blending free enterprise economic incentives and communist control, and then there's the unification of Europe. All of this, from a political point of view, has been nothing but a web of lies, no more so than uttered by the President of the United States, where almost everything he says is untrue. Shattering Myths, as we consider the plagues that are infecting our planet after religion and politics, we find the world becoming more militaristic, more police states, none worse than the United States, forced compliance, total control, an unjust legal system, different rules for civilians and for governments. Was one of the most telling signs in America is that no matter the area or concern, the government does not play by the rules that it imposes on others. Then, of course, on the economic side, we see the rise of socialist fascism. All across the world, there are empowered individuals and companies, but in a total control mechanism where the people are stratified on one level, those who are slightly above normal are fleeced, those who are below normal are enriched, and the ultimate beneficiaries are the political types and the merchants, bankers that they have enriched and empowered along with them. We find people in a situation where with this integration of central and world banks and of fiat debt systems, that most people around the world are horrifically in debt along with their countries. They have no savings, and it's going to be extraordinarily easy to manipulate such people. You know, when the world does what we witnessed in Cyprus, where the minuscule savings of the majority of people, say about 55 to 60% of people who have essentially no savings and significant debts, that when they are left alone in the savings and earnings of those who have considerable wealth or just have anything more than what you would view as maybe $100,000 in savings in America, in American dollars, are robbed, you're going to find universal support amongst the 60% whose savings aren't touched. And when you offer those individuals a get-out-of-jail-free card, if you will, forgiveness for their debt, because the money won't be worth anything at that point, and the government will say, we just start clean. We'll wipe out the national debt to all those it's owed to, and we'll wipe out individual debt. So long as you go along with our new currency, our new economic scheme, our new centralized banking institution, and you're going to find most people willing to play along. We find in this economic malfeasance an increased dependence on failed institutions. In the Americas, you've got the welfare state, earned income tax credits being the mask for the veil for what is really an expanded version of welfare, unemployment benefits, subsidized housing, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, even foreclosure relief, tax relief, credit card relief, bankruptcy relief, all leading to an economic collapse. All of these things working collectively in the background, all with their own little noise, all going unnoticed by most people, all leading to a collapse at about the same time. You then have the failure of our educational systems and educational indoctrination, where the national religion of socialist secular humanism is preached. Political correctness is the order of the day. There are no wrong answers unless the answer is right, in which case it is always wrong. There is a control issue here. Deceptions are being taught as science. Global warming, man-made global warming is a great example of that. Macroevolution is a great example of that. Deceptions being taught as if they were scientific fact. We have revisionist history. For example, Abraham Lincoln, who was a racist, Abraham Lincoln in the Douglas debates spoke of deporting all Africans into reservations, very much like America did with the native Indian populations, because he did not want blacks to intermix with whites and didn't want them part of his country. And yet, in revisionist history, Abraham Lincoln becomes the great emancipator. We have, beyond all of this, of course, just apathy, ignorance, and irrationality. Some of that born out of the media, some by video games, some by our choice of movies. If you want to see just a microcosm of all of this in one place, it's a viral video right now that is available online. It's a New Mexico traffic officer stopped a car on an expressway for going 71 in a 55 zone, and the officer loses all control. Tries to arrest the woman. The 14-year-old son tries to protect the mom. They bang out the windows of the car, taser the son. The woman drives away. It's a horrific scene. Go back to Shattering Myths. It was the combination of apathy, ignorance, immorality, irrationality. We're all on display on the traffic stop in New Mexico. A couple of family, mom and I think 4 kids, the oldest being 14, the youngest being about 6 years old, pulled over for speeding. And, there's an attitude now that's in cops. I mean, the combination of the gun laws now, where so few people are armed, just the nature of those who choose law enforcement or military service, and their kind of gang mentality amongst themselves. and it's a belligerency. I mean, I remember just not too long ago when I was driving across the country, how many more traffic stops I saw of, and the kind of just the approach and the attitude of the cops along the way, and how I just said, I'm just not going to speed because I just don't want to have to deal with that attitude. And they approached a woman in an aggressive, kind of hostile way, and she responded that she didn't feel safe with her children around them. I don't blame her. She tried to drive away to a public place where they wouldn't be so vulnerable, and they tried to arrest the woman, which was just way out of whack for what she had done. They tried to taser the boy for trying to protect the mom, way out of whack. Beating out the side window of a car, and then another policeman firing live rounds. I mean, firing from his service revolver into the back of the car with 6-year-old children in it. It's just a stunning display of what I think we're likely to see. Did the woman express great judgment? Probably not. Were the police incapable of moral judgment? Absolutely. Power corrupting, and it's microcosm, I think, of what you're going to see as we move forward in time over this next 15 years. Speaking of it being a bad week for Islam, a number of stories. We won't get to all of them today, but 9 months after the French invasion of Mali, an invasion the day of, I said this is going to turn out badly for them. They're going to talk about all of their great successes initially. It will be very similar to what we witnessed with the United States in invading Iraq and Afghanistan, where, shock and awe were the order of the day, and everybody rallied around the flag. Well, it was obvious that this was not going to turn out well for the French. And now there's announcements that I was right, that experts now are saying that France is bogged down in an open-ended war, and that they're desperate to pass the baton off to UN peacekeepers, but no one wants to get involved. It is a war that was really set up many years ago. Of course, the French now are trying to resolve this by throwing money at the problem. There's been $3 billion of international aid that's been thrown at Mali, but it's simply gone into the hands of war malcontents. The article in this particular case on what has happened in Mali says that Mali imploded last year when Tuareg separatists began a civil war. Well, the Tuareg separatists are fundamentalist Muslims in Mali. They also live in Niger, Algeria, and Libya. They have a history that dates back to the Ottoman Empire. It is from the Ottoman Empire that the name Tuareg was first arrived. They became known to the world because they were very aggressive in resisting the French colonial invasion in the late 19th century, particularly with their scimitars, their broadswords. They today, and for most of their history, have shown a disdain for labor, but they pride themselves as warriors and thus as raiders and as thieves. Their caste system is, and they have one, is ruled by Muslim clerics. Slavery is therefore very, very common amongst the Tuaregs. They tried to take control of the north of Mali following the world support of the Islamic terrorists taking control of Libya. Well, as they did that, because Islamic terrorism was on the rise in the region and was better armed because of the onslaught of weapons provided indirectly by the United States and directly by Qatar, also by the Sudan, we found that the Tuaregs and Islamist militants merged, and their rebellion became legend in that part of the world. The savagery that they imputed on those who were not as fundamentalist as they, or were not of the same tribe. Horrendous. So many video and pictures out of that part of the world with public squares turned into Sharia courts, and women and children and young men and young girls leaving those courts without hands or feet, acid burning their faces, all sorts of signs of torture. And so now the press says that increasingly the lines have been blurred between Islamist militants and separatist rebels, because the separatist rebels and Islamic militants are one and the same. And we find that Mali, even by the most nationalistic and patriotic of individuals, is being recognized as nothing but a place of Islamic terrorism. Mali is entering a guerrilla war, writes a former French diplomat, by sleeper cells and fighters who have returned from Algeria, Libya, and Niger, where they were simply pushed out for a while but have now returned to attack the French. You know, you can't fight a religious foe with bullets and bombs. Militaries are completely useless and, in fact, counterproductive when combating a religious foe. And it doesn't matter if that religion is Islam or socialist secular humanism and therefore communism. You just make a situation worse. It's like pouring kerosene on an open fire. CNN is reporting that Iraq has become a killing field recently. Gunmen burst into a home of a local leader on Thursday in Iraq. The gunmen, religiously inspired, not only killed him, but they killed 5 members of his family, all while they slept. The attackers then planted explosives and blew up the home, burning the bodies inside. Elsewhere in Iraq, a suicide bomb, followed by another, this was a car bomb, followed by a human suicide bomber, attacked a community of al-Timiyah in north of Baghdad. The combination of the 2 suicide bombers killed 16 people, 42 others were wounded. In Tikrit, a man who was a leader and the Awakening Council was killed. That would be a Sunni Muslim killed by a Shia Muslim. The councils, according to CNN, are made up mostly of Sunni fighters. They are, the Awakening Councils are indeed made up exclusively of Sunni. They're not fighters. They're mujahideen and jihadists, which means they are fighters, but we ought to call them what they call themselves, mujahideen, holy warriors, and jihadists, those who fight in Allah's cause. They were allegedly turned against al-Qaeda in 2006, yes, when Petraeus had this brainstorming of an idea that he could get Sunnis to fight Sunnis by arming Sunni mujahideen. He called it the Awakening Program, and that they would fight al-Qaeda. All that happened is they became synonymous with what is known of al-Qaeda. The movement is backed by the United States. We pay the bill for it. And while their alleged target is jihadists, they are, in fact, jihadists. It was one of many killings targeted at Awakening Council members in Iraq this past week. 14 killed, 15 wounded. In Mosul, a bomb at a vegetable market killed 3 people and wounded another 10 as Muslims struck terror on innocent civilians. In Anna, a suicide bomber in Iraq targeted a checkpoint, killing 3, wounding 5 others. Another 27 people were killed and 58 were wounded when a suicide bomber wearing an explosive vest blew himself up among Shiite pilgrims in al-Saadiyah. In Baghdad, 2 people were shot dead by a gunman in a variety of different incidents. A suicide bomber followed a pair of blasts in eastern Iraq that killed 9, injured 25. This is all over the past 4 or 5 days. Many of the attacks, the most deadly, took place in Wasit, as thousands of Shiite Muslims jammed the streets to attend the festivities marking Ashura, which is the most important religious day on the Shiite Muslim calendar. The Ashura ceremonies now in Islam commemorate the death of Hussein. Hussein was the grandson of Muhammad, killing the last blood relative of Muhammad. This was done in a fight between what is now known between Sunni and Shia Muslims. There were those Muslims who thought that the war machine and the terrorist machine, the pirate robbing machine that had become Islam, which was stunningly effective at controlling people and robbing people and making money through barbarism, should be controlled by a blood relative of Muhammad and therefore by Hussein. There were others that said, hey, it was the Quraysh tribe in Mecca that originally united with Muhammad, and that therefore the Quraysh tribe should control the power. It's not about blood, it's about those who first picked up swords to terrorize, to rob, to plunder in the name of Islam. And of course in this fight, the Sunnis have prevailed largely. 90% of Muslims today are Sunnis, 10% are Shia. And even in this Ashura Day, while now it is given nominative credit for the death of Hussein at the hands of fellow Muslims, beginning the Sunni-Shia divide, the fact is that Ashura Day was a day that was where rabbinical Jews in Yathrib were still celebrating Babylonian festivals, just as they celebrate Rosh Hashanah even to this day, even as they celebrate weeping for Tammuz even to this day. And Ashura Day is an example of that. Well, as we look at what has happened in Iraq, clearly it has become a killing field. Over 7,000 people have died from Islamic terrorism in Iraq this year alone. And it's all because America broke the country. We invaded it. We left it broken. And we have turned Iraq into a killing field. It was not that before America entered. Yes, there was one example of terrorism being perpetrated by the government on the Kurds, and perhaps several thousand people may have died in that. It was all part, actually, of the war with Iran, so it wasn't just an isolated terrorist attack. The Kurds, for reasons unknown to me, decided that they would have a better chance if they allied with the Iranians in the midst of the Iraq-Iran war. And this Kurdish town that had been seen aiding and abetting the Iranians inside of Iraq during that war was gassed. Several thousand people died, but it's nothing compared to the carnage that is taking place there now every month. And that was several thousand people over a decade of Saddam Hussein's rule. And now twice that many people, 3 times that many people die every year as a result of the terrorism that has been unleashed in Iraq as a direct result of the American invasion. Well, the same thing is true with Tripoli, Libya. I don't know if you've been following the news there, but gun battles between rival militias have raged in several parts of the Libyan capital. The gun battles are actually being fought with anti-aircraft guns. Yes, you know, this notion that the jihadists are just, they were freedom fighters, politically motivated to address the grievances of government in Libya that Senator John McClown from Arizona was trying to promote. It's an absolute lie. They were armed at the beginning of that assault against Muammar Gaddafi with surface-to-air missiles, with rocket-propelled grenades, with 50 caliber machine guns, with anti-aircraft weapons, just as they are in Syria. It is Qatar that is providing most of these, but most of them have been supplied to Qatar by the United States. And it was those weapons that were turned on civilians in Tripoli. 43 people were killed on Friday night. More than 460 more were injured over the weekend. Libya's prime minister said, we need calm, and tried to control the militias, but the Islamic militias that were responsible for the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi are far worse than was Muammar Gaddafi. And they're armed with all manner of sophisticated weapons, and they are using those weapons now against civilians. The gun battles erupted again on Saturday east of the capital, where rival militiamen clashed at checkpoints. At least 15 more people were killed in those clashes. One of the militants said, "I urge no forces at all to enter Tripoli. It would have a negative and catastrophic consequence." So here's another nation. The United States, in cooperation with Italy, France, and Great Britain, that collectively we aided and abetted jihadists, and they have turned Libya into a terrorist state. A deal that would give Iran essentially complete relief from economic sanctions in exchange for what is being presented as a freeze in some of its nuclear activities is near completion. Secretary of State John Kerry is all excited about it. So is Vladimir Putin. And it is being announced as a first step in a comprehensive pact restricting Tehran's ability to seek nuclear weapons. Of course, it is a complete ruse. And it was obvious that this was going to occur because the fellow that strung the West along and through deception for years is now the prime minister of Iran. And he is a charmer in socialist, secular Western circles. Israel, of course, announced that it was utterly opposed to the new proposal for Iran's nuclear program because they said that Iran is giving nothing and putting themselves within a matter of weeks of having a nuclear bomb. They are saying that they're going to stop 10,000 centrifuges. Well, those are 10,000 centrifuges that are no longer working. They were stopped long ago, which means they're giving up nothing. That they will stop at enriching uranium to 20% fissile strength. Well, 4% is what's necessary to generate electricity.